This is the first episode of a new weekly series that I'm going to be starting where just me, Tyler, or whoever I bring on, I don't really know how it's going to go. I'm going to talk about music, something related to music, something that's happening, anything that I kind of feel like talking about music, anything related. The first artist that kind of came along that I got massively into was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, obviously by way of my father. On October 2nd, that is 13 days ago, it was almost 2 weeks, he passed away. He had a cardiac arrest. They took him off of life support. It's very tragic. He died at the age of 66. And really, Tom Petty was an absolute fucking legend. He consistently came out from 1976 to about 1994. He was making albums that were, creating amazing hits that were huge among a lot of people all through the 80s, through the 90s, and obviously, like I said, through the late 70s. And I don't think anybody really represents the American version of like the rock star dream than Tom Petty. I think that image comes from him. His first album was self-titled, and it was with the full band. It was just called Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and if it didn't just have like the most kick-ass album art, it's like the best one out of all. No, the best cover is probably Wildflowers, but we'll get to that. I just love how sassy Tom looks on the cover with like the smoke behind him and the heart with the ribbon logo. It's like, and he's wearing a leather jacket. It's the most stereotypical rock album cover you could think of. And, I think that is a really, really fitting cover for that album because that album is just like the most raw he ever went, the most full punk kind of Tom Petty ever saw. The big hits off of that one were obviously American Girl and Breakdown. Fooled Again was a pretty big hit. Anything that's rock and roll was a big one. And it was just, like I said, it was just his most raw. The snare mix in this one is really different than the rest of his albums. It's really kind of a more of a dull kind of sound as opposed to like a snap, But it's an amazing album. He came right out the gate with American Girl and Breakdown. I mean, not many artists really do something like that. His next album was 1978. It was called You're Gonna Get It. And to me, that wasn't a super important album. It had a couple, I Need to Know on it and Listen to Her Heart. It's a good follow-up to a really, really, good debut album. But then in 1979, he came out with, I think, one of his best albums, which is Damn the Torpedoes. I think this was his best because he had spent the time on the road, and he says about this album that it came from him touring and just seeing the world seeing mainly America, all of it for the first time, and he just had all this energy, and he ended up writing, the four that I wrote down for it were for Refugee. I mean, that's one of his biggest all-time hits. Here Comes My Girl, Even the Losers. And this wasn't like a huge hit, but Century City holds kind of a nice place in my heart because it's it's one of the more high octane songs on that album. And that, that was my first album that I listened to in full of his because my dad had it on a cassette tape that we listened to in his Corvette. And I remember just hearing the beginning of Century City, the and just being locked in. It's really exciting music. After that, in 1981, he put out another kind. It's a lot like You're Gonna Get It. Like he has a couple hits on it that are very significant, but all in all, it is not as like monumental as the self-titled or Damn the Torpedoes. Hard Promises had The Waiting on it, and a really, really great duet called Insider with Tom Petty and Stevie Nicks. And Stevie Nicks is also really well known for wanting to basically be a heartbreaker, and Tom was like, no, the Heartbreakers, there's no girls, which today, if that story had surfaced, would probably not be as kind of thought of as funny and anecdotal. But after that is an album that I really like because it transitions really well from Tom's kind of early, more adrenaline-filled rock music to his more 80s sound. Yeah, 82 is when Long After Dark came out. It had two songs on it that were kind of pretty big. You Got Lucky and Change of Heart. You Got Lucky was really, really big because it was one of the first big hits that went to music video for MTV. It's kind of around the start of MTV. And I mean, Tom Petty is well known for being a proponent for MTV and making music videos and being a part of it. He did Don't Come Around Here No More on his 85 album, Southern Accents. And Don't Come Around Here No More has like one of the best music videos, probably his best music video, I would say. It's so cool. It's the, what is it? It's that Alice in Wonderland thing where Tom plays the Mad Hatter. An album that I personally don't really like very much. It's not bad. It's just not as good, I think, as some of his other albums. It's called Let Me Up, I've Had Enough in 87. It had a hit on it that I kind of like called Jammin' Me. But after that, I mean, there's not really a whole lot that kind of strikes it for me. And I don't think it was, not that it's a bad album, because again, it's Tom Petty. I mean, he didn't really put out a lot of bad around that time. It's just not as significant, I don't think. And then in 1988, Tom had one of his really most significant projects happen, which was the Traveling Wilburys. They put out their first album, the Traveling Wilburys Volume 1. The Traveling Wilburys, if you didn't know, includes Tom Petty, obviously, Roy Orbison, Bob Dylan, George Harrison, and Jeff Lynne. I don't think I'm leaving anybody out. And they put out some, I mean, that album, Volume 1, was just like, it kind of took everything by storm when it first came out, because it's a super group of some of the most significant singer-songwriters of the last decade, and last 2 decades, really. I mean, it had Handle with Care on it and End of the Line. And I mean, those songs are just, I mean, especially End of the Line is just iconic. It really gives off that vibe of just like really pretty American countryside kind of rock pop type of thing going on, and it rockabilly, if you will. And then after that, I believe, is Tom Petty's biggest album, and very strangely, not a lot of people really think about it. It is his first solo album. It's called Full Moon Fever. This is definitely the album that I think pretty much everybody else have listened to the most. It's probably the most perfectly mixed and most perfectly kind of constructed album that he did right at the end of the 80s. He did, obviously, on that album, Free Fallin', I Won't Back Down, A Face in the Crowd, Running Down a Dream, You're So Bad, A Mind with a Heart of Its Own, Depending on You, Zombie Zoo. It's a really, really fantastic record. From start to finish, it's full Tom Petty. It's all the hits kind of across the board put onto one album, like that kind of quality. It's the start of, from there, I think, his best albums kind of right in a row. Right after that is, in my opinion, Tom's best album. I mean, Full Moon Fever is, like I said, probably the one I've spent the most time with, just because it's the most easily accessible material and most digestible. But I think in terms of quality, Wildflowers in 1994 is his best work. It's the most thoughtful, most high-thinking Tom Petty there really was. I mean, it came out right the gate with, I think, one of the most beautiful acoustic songs in like modern popular music, modern mainstream music, which is the song Wildflowers, the title track. It has just a beautiful melody, beautiful lyrics, and then it goes right into You Don't Know How It Feels, which I think is like one of the most relatable songs of all time. It's just about, being down on your luck and feeling like, no one really understands. And then as it goes on, you get You Wreck Me, It's Good to Be King, Honeybee, Don't Fade on Me, Cabin Down Below, Crawling Back to You. It's good, great fucking song after great fucking song. I don't think there's an album I've listened to in recent times like a slower like singer-songwriter type of album that I think kind of, compares to it. It's the best of Tom Petty. But then after that, I mean, he did keep going with music. He took a very humble approach. He didn't try and make a bunch of records of like he didn't try to keep forcing himself. I think he only really did put out more material when he felt like he had something meaningful to say. 96 was She's the One soundtrack, which is, from the movie. Then 1999, he did Echo. These are kind of the honorable mentions. Haven't spent a whole lot of time with them, admittedly. Then in 2002, The Last DJ. 2006, Highway Companion. 2010 was Mojo. And 2014 was Hypnotic Eye. I've seen Tom Petty twice. Now, I saw him first in 2007 on the tour for Highway Companion. It had some really interesting material on it. I mean, I went back and listened to the stuff later in life that they played. I saw Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers for the first time when I was, I think, 12. I think I was in 5th grade, 11 years old, something like that. It was amazing. It was my first concert, and I was super into Tom, and I just remember the feeling of seeing Tom, this guy who I had kind of looked up to for, the past couple years. I kind of got into him when I was around 8 years old, first starting to learn guitar. My second song I ever learned on the guitar was Mary Jane's Last Dance. And then I just recently, I saw him on the 40th anniversary tour for, it's technically following Hypnotic Eye from 2014. It was 3 years ago, but he still played, I think, one song from that album. He, to me, was keeping it going, and he kept an energetic, approach, but I've read that he was hurt, and I remember thinking, not that he looked like he was hurt, not that I had any inclination that he was, but that he sounded a little off. He sounded like he didn't have as much energy as before, which made sense because it was, an 11-year or 10-year gap since the last time I had seen him. Bob Dylan put it in his most recent quote, Tom Petty had the light, and I think that sums it up. If you love Tom Petty, like I do, put it right in the comments, because I really want to talk to people right now. It's a time of mourning, I think, for a lot of people, for me included. It made me take a step back. So I hope that you guys follow up and keep watching this series. I want to keep doing more content like this, and stay tuned.